Hello fellow Earthlings, it's Libs, and today it's time for my March wrap-up. Okay, so I read 9 books in March, which I'm pretty happy with. That ended up being 1,884 pages. My moods I read the most were mysterious, emotional, reflective, and dark, which makes sense. Most were at medium pace, most were under 300 pages. Pretty much everything I read was fiction almost. And my most read genres this month were classics and literary. So I think I'll start, as per usual, with my least favourite books. My average star rating was 3.92 stars. So I'll start with my 3-star books. Hang on. Yeah, that's a better angle. So my least favourite book of March was probably The Breakthrough by Daphne du Maurier. This is one of the Tiny Penguin One Classic editions, and this is like a science fiction book that I have already forgotten, which is not really what you want to say. Why is this at such a weird angle? There we go. I don't really remember it at all, and I only read it a few weeks ago, but it didn't really stand out to me. I don't know. This guy goes somewhere up in England to look at something. I don't know. It was a bit bland. It was a bit boring. I definitely prefer her proper novels. Then we have the Agatha Christie I read this month, which was The Moving Finger, which is the 3rd Miss Marple book. And I knew I wasn't going to like this, because I've watched the adaptation, and it's probably one of my least favourite Miss Marple adaptations. So, yeah, I knew I wasn't going to like this, and I didn't really. I just thought it was quite a predictable story. I don't love the audiobook for this either. I think it must be that the Miss Marples all have like a older lady reading them, but her voice just isn't very clear, and the book's not actually told from Miss Marple's point of view, so it was very distracting when it's by like a younger man is meant to be the narrator, but it isn't the narrator, and I don't know, it was a weird time. I didn't love it. So guess who forgot to tell you anything about The Moving Finger? This girl. Okay, so this is a story of a brother and sister. The brother, I think, was a pilot, and he's had an injury, and his doctor tells him he should move to the countryside, somewhere where it's nice and quiet, to recover. So he and his sister go to this little town. Everything's kind of normal, and then they find out that some mysterious person has been sending these letters, these scandalous letters that are making all kinds of allegations against different people in the town, and they're like really scandalous things. They get one claiming that the brother and sister are not brother and sister, but are in fact secretly living in sin together, and things like that. And then one woman is so distressed by the lies that she is reading about herself from these letters that she decides she no longer wants to live anymore, and now the police are investigating to see what's going on, if it's driving people to this point. And that is all I will tell you about The Moving Finger. It's an interesting concept, but again, I found it kind of predictable, and I know this, and it's not just because I know the story, because I know the story of Ordeal by Innocence, but I still loved reading the book. But yeah, this one just isn't for me in any of the ways I've consumed this story. And then my final 3-star book of the month was The Birds and Don't Look Now by Daphne du Maurier. So this is an audiobook that's read by Peter Capaldi, which is why I wanted to read it. And I liked it, I like the birds. I like a fair bit of Don't Look Now, but it didn't stand out in any real way, and there's nothing particularly special about either. I think Daphne du Maurier's endings always tend to make me feel like something is lacking a little bit. I always just want just a little bit more. I have one 3.25 book, and that is The Trees by Percival Everett. So this is a book that everyone has very polarizing opinions about. And I don't want to spoil anything, because I think you kind of have to go in quite blind to this book. I think my issue with it was that you are in a situation where you are reading about a lot of characters who are very, very racist, and it's like calling them out and everything. But I think because they are so racist, some of the things that are happening later on in the book that are meant to be shocking don't feel shocking. Or they don't feel as shocking as they're meant to, because you've already read so much. And I just think it could have been more impactful if there was a build-up or something. It wasn't. It was really impactful at the start, and it just lost it as it went through, because it should have built it up a bit more instead of having it all from the start, if that makes any sense. It's a weird book that's based kind of on something that did happen, but I don't know, it was very strange, and I was there for the concept, but it didn't do it for me. Then I have one 4-star book, and that is The Extraordinary Life of an Ordinary Man, a memoir by Paul Newman. I always enjoy reading the memoirs of classic film stars. I study film, so it's always interesting. I liked this. I think Paul Newman did a very good job at kind of looking back at his life and recognizing the privileges he had, and is very open about quite a lot of things. And that's about it, really. There's nothing particularly special about this book, but I do think he did a good job at evaluating his life. And then I have two 4.5-star books. The first is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I finally read The Bell Jar. This is a book that I've assumed I was going to love, and therefore just didn't read it. I don't really have a reason for that. I think I just really wanted a good cover, because most of the covers of The Bell Jar are kind of rubbish. They're just not very exciting, and for such a classic, I feel like you've got to have a good one. So the illustrated edition came out, and I picked it up immediately because it's beautiful, and I really enjoyed this. I think everyone kind of knows at least something about The Bell Jar, but it's about this young woman who wins the opportunity to go on this trip to New York to write for a magazine for a month, and as time progresses she becomes more and more depressed and mentally unwell, and it's about the fallout from her becoming so ill. And it's definitely something you don't want to read if you're not in the best mental state, but I did really enjoy the way that the world was built, and particularly the illustrated edition. It was just beautiful. And then the final 4.5-star book I read was a novella, and that was The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nhi Vo. This is the first book in the Singing Hills cycle, and I loved this. I didn't really know what I was getting into when I decided to pick this one up from the library, but I was obsessed with it. You've got a cleric in a world that's kind of like ancient China, and they are traveling and they meet this older woman who tells them stories of her time with the previous empress and some of the things that she did. And I don't want to spoil it because it's just so beautifully written. I couldn't get over it. I definitely want to read more from this author because this was just such a great kind of taste of what she can do. And I just had such a phenomenal time with this book. Can't wait to read more. And then I have 2 5-star books. The first is Someday Maybe by Oni Nawabineli. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce that. This is another story about grief, and for some reason I seem to really enjoy these very sad books. Listened to the audiobook, and that was narrated by the woman who plays Lady Danbury in Bridgerton, so that was very exciting. I think that added an extra layer to my enjoyment of this book. So our main character, her husband dies in very sad circumstances, and it's about her trying to come to terms with this while realizing she can never really come to terms with this, and trying to find a way to feel her feelings but also to heal, because her family is very much taking care of her because she's in a position where she can't take care of herself. And it's very sad, but it's very beautiful. I really enjoyed it. I did have a few little issues with things that just got resolved, I think, too easily at the end for a few of the side characters, but besides that, it was a really fantastic book. And then my favourite book of the month, which I don't think should be a surprise, was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I finally read it. A little embarrassed it's taken me so long to read it, but again, it's another book where I just assumed I was going to love it and then just didn't read it. But I love Pride and Prejudice. I've watched the BBC miniseries from 1995 maybe 30 times. I watched it a lot. I watched it in a day after I finished reading the book. I love it. I love it so much. It does such a good job. And I liked having the extra context from the book. And I think if you haven't read Austen, please do. It's fantastic. I kind of half read and half listened to this book. And I think it was a really good way to do it because it is quite easy to read, but sometimes some of the phrasing can be a little bit confusing. So listening to it, you understand it better. But it was just a phenomenal book, and I'm so glad that I finally read a Jane Austen. Okay, those are all the books I read in March. Let me know what you've been reading and loving down below, and I will see you next time. Bye.